Right. I believe this is recording. Greetings, everyone. I will just do a little bit of an introduction of myself before we get into a little bit of a practical demonstration on how to do some GIS work that will be beneficial towards your projects that you all are doing for UNFPA. My name is Muzzammil Mohabir, and I do a plethora of things, but by profession, I am a lecturer at the University of Guyana with a primary focus on cartography, GIS, and remote sensing approaches at both the undergrad and postgraduate levels. I also do a lot of work with Policy Forum Guyana, an NGO within Guyana that does a plethora of work within the social sciences and youth involvement in environment, policy, and planning. And thus, I'm working with them for this project in uh, enhancing our understanding of GIS, remote sensing, and the like within the broader Caribbean area and within this project by the UNFPA. I will take off my screen for the duration of the session, mainly because I don't want any back and forth when I'm sharing the screen between my talking and what I'm trying to demonstrate to you all. So what we're going to get into is primarily looking at GIS as a field. And I know many of you might not have a background within GIS and might be wondering, oh, what is he even talking about to begin with? So I will give you a little bit of a background into what GIS and cartography and what all of these terms are about, just so that it can scope your minds to what the possibilities might be regarding this field altogether. All right. So a couple of things when we want to look at geography, right? It's always about thinking about the environment because we always want to map various things. And you're going to see that I'm going to pull from various pieces of information so that you can have the most compact information that would benefit you throughout your planning and development phases of the various projects that you'll be getting into. And so the first thing that I want to discuss to you is understanding the environment, because the environment or the real world is the actual area that you're going to be mapping, that you're going to be pulling a lot of social sciences information from. And so the process of mapping really starts to understanding the environment and what you're able to see and discern from the environment. And we're able to do that through a number of sources, technology, remote sensing, but primarily through the perception of the human eye. And the human eye has always been and probably will be the most important part within this whole mapping process, because you, as up and coming map makers, as cartographers, you will be in charge of producing your own pieces of information that will guide decision making and furthering different causes within local communities. So you as a map maker must be able to visualize information that appears on the geographic reality. And so we go through that as a map maker, you're able to encode information. And when we say encode information, we mean that you're able to simplify the real environment, because the real environment can be very, very complex. And think of a single swath of land, maybe a few feet or a few meters square. There's a whole bunch of information that can be discerned from that. You can look at soil, you can look at geology, you can look at vegetation, you can look at air quality, temperature, and a whole host of other parameters. But all of those parameters simply cannot be mapped onto a sheet of paper, onto a computer screen. And so we need to take out what's important to us. And that is the encoding processing, mapping what's important and putting that map on, whether you're making a digital map or you're making a virtual map, something that's static or dynamic. And you, as a map maker, need to be able to make a map in such a way so that it can be decoded by map users. And map users are the people who are going to be looking at your map and trying to understand what it is that you are actually trying to tell them. And so the main purpose of the map is to aid some decision making, which is what we term spatial cognition. So how people would then interact with the environment based on the information that you provide them. They might be able to make new and informed decisions to say, okay, we might not want to dump garbage in these canals because now we can actually see that that the sites for garbage are actually compiling and blocking waterways. Or on the social sciences front, we might be seeing a number of elements that are leading towards social issues such as drug use or teenage pregnancies. And those parameters become very jarring when we're able to see it visually and mapped out in front of our eyes, especially across geographic areas. And what that does is actually causing change within environments. All right. And so that there is the principle behind the whole reason why we map. So you're going to hear these terms cartography, you're going to hear these terms GIS, and I don't want you to really get confused by them. What they are really talking about is geographic information systems. Geographic information systems just talk about systems that are able to map information about the geographic reality, meaning what is actually on Earth. All right. And it's very helpful in that way because we're able to visualize new pieces of information. And then cartography is actually the mapping part of it. Like, what do we put on the map and how do we utilize different colors and things like that to actually show changes in the natural environment. So I know that many of you will be utilizing GIS to show a number of social science operations and a number of tools that might be useful. And that's primarily what I want to spend a lot of time with, going through with you the various tools that would actually benefit you in this whole entire mapping application. Okay. Great. So what we're going to get into, and I've had this little PowerPoint here to guide our way through this entire discussion, is giving you guys a little workflow to see where we're going to look at. And so it may take around this timeline, about 30 minutes, a little bit more as we get into some timings. But we're going to be talking about some basic aspects of mapping and going through some of the applications that we have relating to maps. So the first thing that we need to talk about is understanding point lines and polygons within a mapping environment. So in GIS and in many of these applications that we'll be covering, you'll see that we talk about how we represent information on maps. Meaning you have a house or you have a school or you have a river or road, we can't actually draw the exact school or the exact road or things like that. We have to make representations of them. And the way we're able to do that is through geometric shapes. So in geometry, you'll know that there are point, lines, and areas. So within a GIS environment, they're the same point, lines, and polygons, they're called. And so a point is essentially one coordinate, and coordinates are locations that we have or absolute locations of places on Earth. And so it will have one X and Y coordinate to show one location. So a coordinate for a school, a coordinate for a shelter, a coordinate for a police station, a clinic, a hospital, something like that, right? A line will be more of those linear features that exist on the Earth, right? So roads and coastlines and rivers typically can take that form. Now here's where it gets a little bit complicated, but interesting as well. We know that at our local scales, if we're in our yard, we know that our yards are obviously larger than a point, right? And that is where it comes into the scale of the map that you're mapping. Maybe you're doing a map for the entire Caribbean, or maybe you're doing a map for the entire country. And those are pretty large scale maps, right? And you're going to hear these terms being thrown around a lot, large scale maps and small scale maps, but you shouldn't really get confused by them, right? So when you find a map that is large scale, it means that it covers a small area in great detail, right? When you find a small scale map, you're going to see a map that covers a large area in very little detail. And it might seem contrary, but there's a very quick way to go around and understanding that. But it's for you to just have a picture of it right now. So the reason why I've brought that in is because at certain points, depending on the scale that you're drawing your map at, maybe you're doing it at a community scale or at a village scale, and then it might be wiser to place your homes or houses as polygons instead of points, right? Because then you might want to actually show information in that way. So point lines and polygons, and then you're going to have certain things like layers. And layers is what we call one type of map information on a mapping environment or a mapping application or software, right? And so things like services, hazards, populations are different pieces of information or social information that you can't really see on a map, but can be visualized on information that you can't really see in the geographical reality. You can't just go out your yard and look around your community and say, oh yes, 12 people live here or 50 people live here. You can't realistically know that. Or you can't go out and so much inches of water has flooded in the community or all these areas. You can't simply do that by looking out. But those are information that can be mapped through proxies, through social sciences information. All right. And the primary thing is that you need to, it's fun, it's useful because maps tell us a story. It can tell us health services, it can tell us flood prone zones, it could tell us youth populations. And so it can help us answer questions, right? Things like where are young people exposed to risk and are far from support, right? And how can we know that? A risk for flooding and where the locations of clinics or hospitals or services like that. We can actually visualize that with mapping. So that's kind of enough on the talking side of it. We want to get into the actual demonstrative work. One of the first applications that I want to show you guys too is called Google Earth Pro. It's a computer application that you can have on your system. It looks pretty much like this here, and it's free to download. All the applications that I'll be showing you in this session are free to download. So Google Earth Pro, when you open it up, it opens something like this. It has a whole bunch of information, but we're going to tune it down for the major ones that we want to look at. And so we'll take a little bit of deep dive, and this one here, maybe just looking at Guyana, for example. So we're going to zoom in to the country and we can take a look at the capital, right? We can see that Georgetown is being labeled. And the reason why we're able to see some labels are due to the layers option that we have here. So you can turn on and off labels, and you can see that certain things, places disappear and return on and off based on the labels that we have. And then you zoom in with your mouse, but there's also these options at the very right of the page that can actually turn the north and help you move in different directions, and then zoom and also do those things. But once you have a handy mouse attached to your computer system, they're pretty easy to move around and do things which you can investigate on your own time. So maybe we can zoom into the Eugene F. Carré, which is a regional airport just on the fringes of Georgetown, the capital city. And we're going to see how we can add these elements that we spoke about, being point lines and polygons, right? So we can see a few of the linear features like this runway and some access roads coming in to these areas, right? So we can then start to represent this area so that we can build out a map. How do we go about doing that, you might ask, is through these very small options at the top panel here. And these are all different things that you can use and utilize, but I'm giving you the very basics of these tools. So the first thing you're going to do is see that there's this point icon, which is like a tack, a thumbtack, which is your point icon. When you click on that, you can see that it's called a place mark in this case. And you can name different places. We can name one place the plane hangar, right? And you can actually go about changing how these look. You can actually maybe even put that to a different icon altogether. Like they have a plane there, and you can actually change colors and all of that that you can play around with, as you can see, right? And then once I'm comfortable with the location of that, I can just click OK. All right. And there's more things that you can actually read information add descriptions and so on. They're not really necessary, but they're elements that you can do. And when you hit OK, you can see that it gets added to the barrage of information that I already have within places, but it might be new information for you here. So we have plane hangar. That's one way we can go about adding point information on our maps. We can go ahead and add a lot more point information, but we'll utilize the opportunity to add line information. Line in Google Earth Pro is called a path, and we'll go about adding that here. And you can see we want to start on either end of this information. So we click here and hit path. We click the other end, and that line appears there. We can then go to color, change that over to maybe like a red so that it becomes visible. Hit OK, and then we can change the size of it as well to make it a bit wider when we want to posit this information. And we'll take it at about 4. Hit OK on that, and you can actually see that main road being appearing there. You can see, oh, I forgot to name this. What do I do? You just really need to click on it, ensure that it's highlighted the way it is there, and then right click and go to your properties. And then you just come back into it, and then you name it runway. You hit OK, right? And then you can go about and do a lot others as well. You can see that this here is a connecting road. We can go ahead and do a connecting road and just do the little turns that it has, right? We can then even say we make a mistake like that, we can move that out of the way by clicking on it and hitting OK. If you do make a mistake while it is being edited, you can just cancel it altogether and you see it disappears. All right. So there's no need to panic about it. So now we can just try these just on for size, and we can change their color so that they appear as, that they're different from the actual runway. And we could name them roads, if that's what they are. And you can see how that appears on the information. Then we can go ahead and create polygons. You can see that these buildings lend themselves very well to placing polygons. So we can actually click polygons, and how you do these are actually clicking on the edges of buildings so that you can actually maximize on that shape there. And you can see I'm doing that, and I can hit OK. I can do another one here again, click on it again, and create like that, okay? And so there's a few pieces of information that has been founded on this map. Okay, so with that couple pieces of information, right, the next point that you can do is maybe you need to fill a lot more pieces, and this is just for your demonstration, but you can fill a lot more pieces of information on this. So what you can go about doing is, how do you actually produce this map? You can see this little icon here that comes up when you click on it, the third to last one. And you're going to see that you can name things like you can name it regional airport, Guyana, right? You can add a description if that's needed, or you can just remove that altogether. You can see that name has been adjusted. The legend is present based on the information that you've placed in this area. The north arrow, as you can see at the very end here, which you can move, put in different locations, and your scale, which is the main pieces of information that you want. And then you could zoom into the map however it is that you want to. All right. With that, now you can go ahead and save this information. And it saves typically as a JPEG or a PNG file, whichever it is that you're comfortable. And I'll give this a demo, Google Earth Pro. Right? Hit save on that, and then I'll just show you how that turns up here. Excellent. You can actually see the parts of the information that has been put together and the different legends of it. Then you can utilize that in however way you feel comfortable. All right. The next application that I think is useful for you all is called Google My Maps, right? So Google My Maps is a different application that is on the web and doesn't need an app for you to download, right? And it's also pretty helpful when you have what is called CSV files or Excel files that you want to import new information. So you're going to see I kind of already have a bit of information here, but it's actually connected to your Google accounts that you might have. So I'll go ahead, in this case, I've opened this up. I can go ahead and create a new map. You can read some of the associated information, but you can go ahead and click create, and it shows up like this. Now this here, and this is why I started with Google Earth first, because it has similar pieces of information. You can see that we were able to add markers in the same way, and we can name them and add information. You can see that there is a little less options in terms of the drawing or the ability to place figures to look a bit differently. All right. You can see we have point one there. You can see that we're able to also draw lines on the information, right? And we can actually save those. And what we can also do, which we could do in Google Earth Pro as well, is measure distances, like something like that. And it actually gives us those measured differences. All right. Now, what you're able to do in this case, though, is actually change the way your background looks. Maybe you want to change the background so it looks a little bit more pretty or something like that. And you can actually do that through the base map option. So we can choose something else. You can see it gives a little bit of a contoured texture of the landscape. We can choose something else like this or like this to show information a bit differently. Now, if you created an information that you're not happy with, you can see that you can actually change the color and have a few options in changing icons and things like that. And then you have the wider selection of these and the color options that you could change. All right. Now, great. Now, when you want to delete an option, as you can see, when you click on these points, they don't give you the option within the panel here, but it comes up in this option here. And you can see that there's line 2 for me here. I can hit delete and that removes itself entirely. Now, you might want to add new information, right? And a lot of this information is based on Excel files that you might compile and that you would learn from different sessions about how to actually develop a lot more. But I'll show you the basics of Excel files. All right. So there's a few files that I have here. You can see quite a bit of files. So what I'm going to show you is an example of information that you've compiled within your Excel file. Okay. So you're going to see a few things. You're going to see IDs, and these are all information that you can actually type into your files. Community, types of service, latitude, longitude, opening hours, friendly, access scores. Great. So you can see that I've actually created this information for this demo particularly, and this is the information that is fictitious and that I've collected. All right. So you can see that information is ranked. Their names of clinics or health outposts that I have, the countries that they're from, the specific communities that they're located in, and the types of service that they offer. All right. And then we have the coordinates and some information about the opening and closing hours. You can go ahead and like collect these types of information to map your information. And like I said, a lot of these are attributed information, meaning information that can't be apparent if you go out and look into an area. But these are things that can be found and mapped about, the clinic and what is its coordinates and what is its service type and things like that are all information are attributes about that specific place that you're mapping. So having a look at this sheet here, we can then actually, if you've saved this and you've saved it as a CSV file, you can actually import it within this layer here. And so we can go about doing that by actually clicking this layer tab here. And you can see where it says import layer. You can see it says import data from CSV file, Excel, or KML files. KML is the Google format of how you can actually pull information from like applications such as Google Earth Pro and things like that. So what I want to do is to upload the information. The file that I want to upload is obviously the demo for service points for my maps. I click OK. And then you want to read through this, but I'll give you the simplified version. The first one is to know the coordinates of where it needs to actually place all of this information. So obviously we want the longitude, latitude, click OK. Then it wants you to actually how we go about naming these places. We can choose ID or name. I'll choose name just because it's a little bit more intuitive for us to understand, and then I'll hit finish. Then now what you find is that the information has zoomed out quite a bit. You can see that there's information for Belize, there's information for Montserrat, Trinidad, Grenada, St. Lucia, Barbados, Guyana, Suriname as well, all right? Just like I indicated, we can go ahead and change how those things appear and the icons that are probably used for them, all right? But at this point, it really depends on what we're mapping. So there's information. Now the added thing is because the CSV file had a whole bunch of pieces of information, we can actually click on these to see what information is on them exactly, which is the attribute information. You can see that this is ID 10. It's the Scarborough Health Desk in the country of Trinidad and Tobago. The service type is a youth desk, right? The opening hours are 8 to 3 p.m. And there is low flood risk based on information you've collected from some other sources and things like that. Remember that all of this is fictitious information that has just been placed so that you can understand how data is actually analyzed. Data collection by itself is a huge other field that you might want to get into at some other point to try to understand how you go about collecting all of these information from organizations to organizations. And we will touch a bit on that in a second. You can see there's also the Clinic of Port of Spain. There is Anna Regina Health Center. You can see that there's a New Amsterdam Youth Desk and all of the information that is here for you to review and have. All right. Now, when you have this information, a useful part of it is that you're actually able to share it across domains. And how you go about doing that is through this share icon here. You have the share. You click on share, you can give it a title, hit OK. And you can actually share this link with anyone, share it with only specific persons, and then so that your friends, your colleagues can have access to that information. And then you can actually name this, name it service options for youths in the Caribbean. Right. You hit save on that. You can actually see that information being here. Now you can see these little 3 dots here. It can actually show you different things that you can do. You can move things to trash, you can export information, but then you can go ahead and print this information. You can see there's a few options, landscape or portrait, and it's PDF. We can do a landscape because the information is wider than it is longer, which is a good frame of reference. And you can download it as an image or PDF. You can go ahead and print that. It shows up. We can click OK, save, and have that present here. Save that. And that it comes up. You can see that the information is placed and the layers that we have actually been located in the legend, and the information can be visualized on what we have here. All right. Now this is useful, but the mapping design needs some more work and some more playing around when you're actually designing how things look. And you can actually see this option here and actually go back and make changes of how you want the information to be displayed. Obviously, you might want to cover smaller areas or actually maybe use a different application to show your information. Now, those are 2 pieces of information that you have here, right? Excellent. Now, we can actually look at about data side of it, how we might want to visualize, say, graphs or charts or stuff like that. Now, a great option to doing that is Data Wrapper, which is an application that actually shows how we can do a lot of this work. So Data Wrapper is also a website online that doesn't require much. You can actually even utilize the site without having an account, but you would need an account to actually download the information. So I can actually start that for you. You can see that I have my account here. Now the dashboard is pretty simple to work through, and I'll give you the basics of it. All right. So when you have this information here, you can copy and paste information into tables. I don't really recommend this because sometimes there might be errors in your information that you might want to look at. Again, uploading XLS or CSV file would be the best way to go in terms of your data set. I have a data set example here for you that I can show you in this case here. All right, so you can see that there's some information here that would be visualized for you. Youth population, women-headed households, flood exposure index, safe spaces, a few things, priority level. You can see that information being produced across Guyana, Barbados, St. Lucia, Grenada, Trinidad, Suriname, Belize. And so there's a few different things that we can actually visualize or actually map all together. All right. So with this information, remember you can go about and create this sheet by yourself, actually uh, pull information from census, which is the next thing that I'll show you how to actually get information from different sites so that you can actually create these tables or actually download these CSV files and utilize them for your own work that you need to do. Okay. So we have the CSV file and it's made. We can actually come here and upload this file. So click on it. You have the demo for data wrapper. You can see that the information is placed up here. The main thing is about including this information at this upload data set. You can see that it says proceed at the bottom left, and we're going to hit on that. And here is where we check the information. Now there's some writing here. They're going to tell you that numbers have to be written in blue. Dates are written in green. We don't have any information that carry dates, but if there's date information, you want to ensure that it's in green. Text is usually in black, and you can see that that is correct here. And if you see any text in red or information in a red cell, it means that something is wrong with that data, and you have to check on it before you kind of proceed with the rest of the analysis, and you can make those changes. All right. Now we can look through this and we can see that there is no errors present in the data set, and we can then proceed. Proceeding here now, you can see that some graph just starts to pop up. You can choose different types of graphs. You have your bar chart, your column charts, your scatter plots, your pie charts, whatever it is that you feel would best visualize information, right? And how we go about doing this is, say we want to have a bar graph. So you click on your bar graph and you want to different parameters. If you remember on the Excel sheet, there's actually different parameters that we can actually visualize, all right? So we come to refine. You can see that our bar graph, we can map two pieces of information on our two axes, our X and Y axes. We can map the youth population, and the column that we're looking at is the admin areas. You can see different parishes. We can do country level, and you can actually see information showing up for those information presented. All right. We can actually visualize information like this against administrative areas. All right. And we can actually see how much clinics are in specific areas. You can change the bar type, right? And then come back to the refining area here and actually visualize like one piece of information, such as the clinic counts, right? So you can see how many are related in specific areas, or the average safe space counts for different areas as well, or the overall health, right? The woman-headed household percentage. That information is present here. You can actually change colors if you'd like to. Pie size percentages, you can try to increase or decrease that depending on what it is that you're mapping. You have a whole bunch of other options here as well. After you've kind of visualized and you're satisfied with what you have, you can actually name this a pie chart, right? Showing women-led households, right? And then you can actually proceed with this information You can add more description if you like, who's publishing that information, which is what we call metadata. You can continue to proceed with that, and actually anything more that you want to do, any changes that you would like to make, and then you can go ahead and proceed. And then you can go ahead and publish this information, just essentially putting it in the cloud. You can download it as these options, right? So we can do the PNG, and you can see that there's the download option. And we can go about downloading that. And then you have your graph with the various pieces of information that you can use for different work as well. All right. Now I know I'm going through this a bit quickly, but you do have the recordings and you can visualize these again from time to time to acquaint yourself with what you have to do. The next point that I want to jump into, and not to really overwhelm you, is to take a bit of a dive into where you might be able to find information. And this is where it's useful for me to go back to the slide so that you can actually have a little bit of a view on that, right? Now, where it is that you can actually find information, there's different kinds of information, right? So there's information that you can find in shape files, which is information that might be point lines and polygons. There might be social sciences information that you might collect through like population information, head of household information, those types of things. All right. Now, many times, and since you all are going through the Caribbean, you want to look at census information for a lot of the countries, right? For Guyana, for example, which I'm very acquainted with, you do the Guyana census, right? You can actually find that through what we call our agency calling the Bureau of Statistics. So the Bureau of Statistics here is actually on this site, and you can actually visualize the different statistical information that they have present, right? So that's census information. And this is in this example specifically for Bureau of Statistics of Guyana, but you can do the same for any other Caribbean country, Barbados, Trinidad, and you can find their census information published, a fair bit of them published on these sites. Now, what I want to do is to show you how you can actually extract information from this site to make it actually useful for you. I'll try to speed that up, pulling up a different site. It's taking a great. So you can see that Bureau of Statistics is open, and there's a few tabs here. There's the data tab tables, then the census information, which has like a publication of each one that they're able to present to you. But we'll go to the data tables so that you can have an idea of what is actually present for you to utilize. Taking like a little bit of a second to load. So within these, you can actually have the entire preliminary reports, which is what is found in these sections here. All right, you can actually scroll through that and you have the various pieces of information and some maps with statistical information you can actually pull from these census booklets. You can see tables here with new information. You can see adjusted census counts information. There's a whole thing on preliminary count of data, populations by sex, a whole host of information you can actually visualize in this case. All right. And this is how you actually are able to pull information. It's either all copyable, and you can actually place that within your Excel environment. So this is one way how we can get statistical information. The other way how we can find new information is through web databases, right? A common web database where you can find like a few pieces of information is SEDIMA. So the SEDIMA site is particularly useful for collecting flooding information, where clinics are located, boundaries for different countries, and so on that you can utilize and map places for. All right. Right. So we're going to jump back now. You can see here demographic information, trade, hydrometeorological, social security. Um, and we can actually click on these and they actually would have tables that you can download and utilize or pull or sort through information, which I'm sure your other training sessions will dive into it a lot more. Okay. So yes. So Sedima works through its GeoCrest 2 website. You can see that here, GeoCrest. And you can actually find information through countries. We can try Barbados. You can see that it actually shows you the boundary of Barbados, and you can go ahead and actually download pieces of information as polygons, as you can see. And then there's a lot more information in terms of health. There are Barbados health facilities, Barbados river networks, location, transport, bridges, and so on. We can go ahead and maybe download the health facilities. That's quite all right. All right. And you can actually change your countries and actually find more and more places. As you can see, there's Trinidad. There's the boundaries again. You can see settlement boundaries. They have a lot more health facilities, Trinidad's inland waters, different fire stations, education, points of interest, police stations. You can see some countries have a lot more than others. And so this is one other site that you can actually go to visualize information. All right. So that's two sites there. Another site in terms of local information is GuiNode. All right. You can actually check for geospatial information on Guyana and see a few pieces of it here in terms of DEMs, which are raster information, and we really won't go into that, but there's like administrative boundaries, village boundaries, and so on that gives you information as well about the country. Okay. Now, there's a few others that you can dive into as well. Obviously, we've talked about census officers. We can actually look at the UNFPA data portal, right? You can see the data portal is actually the first option that shows up. And you can actually visualize various different countries through this data portal, or you can actually browse through searching through the various options they have. We can try a different Caribbean example. We can try Dominica, for example. Okay. So the sites do take a bit of a minute to load, but we can actually try another one just for size. We can maybe try Haiti to see what it also has in store for us in terms of the data that we can retrieve from these various sites. All right. So for what I've been showing you guys so far is really introductory work, but this is how you can actually utilize information on a larger scale to show a lot more pieces of information. All right. Now, while that's loading up, we can actually take a look at some other sites. Um, so we've gone through a fair bit of all of this. Here, there is there's a few other sites that you can actually find data on as well in terms of shapefile information, which for you isn't largely important at this stage, depending on what you're mapping, but it can be useful in a lot of other senses to get information. And we will talk about those in a second. So as you can see, information is present to you here. You can actually see contraceptive fertility rates, adolescent birth rates. You can see more resources in helping you to visualize a bit of information. So you can have education attainment. You can have that visualized for specific countries, like we are talking about them here, and the site will actually load this type of information for you. Okay, so it's a bit of playing around with different parameters. You can see that there's inequalities. Information is coming up. Total percent in different areas here. You can see percent of population ages 18 plus. all right? And that is being visualized across these countries here where information is available. You can go ahead and clear that selection. You can see that comes off of the screen. And then there is layers that you can actually visualize to show information. Okay. Another site that you can have shapefile information is Diva GIS. Diva GIS carries a barrage of mapping information. You can see where it tells you that you can have spatial, they provide spatial information for you. Countries, you can see just like this, another site here to get maps and data. You can download, you can look at data that you can have, and you can download information by country, by dates. So we can go through, see maybe Haiti as we had before. And you can see shape files, geo packages. These are things that you can explore a bit more, but we can download like shape files to pull the information for you. All right. And then they usually come in zip files that you can utilize. So those are a little bit of the sites. You just want to take your time and review this and have a good grasp of what it actually covers so that you'll be able to understand it fully as you get into your own practice. All right. So one last thing that I want to introduce to you, but not go too much in depth on, is QGIS, which is another desktop application that goes a little bit more into mapping. All right. And it can be a bit intimidating to look at the very beginning. So I won't go into a full demo to show you a lot of things, but there's different things that you can map on QGIS, bringing in those very shape files that we spoke about. Okay. So we can think of like a project. We can go on a blank sheet here. I have a blank sheet of project, and I'll just show you what you can actually visualize very quickly from different places. So we can add like adding information. We can add a vector layer, and I can actually pull information from my computer system that I have. I have a bit of GIS data. So I'll show you what I can actually add. Um, I click that. I can hit add and close. You can actually see that there's a fair bit of information that I can add and visualize for the area, right? And I can actually create a print layout to show information here and actually draw in, so I can add an item, right? Then include the maps that we had. So we want to add the map, scale, right? You can see that the map comes on screen. I can actually resize this a bit and then add elements such as the north arrow. I can add that in there. I can add some more items like the scale. I can add that. And I'm just giving you very basic demonstrations because this requires a little bit more of a learning curve in adding information to it. But if you're ever interested, this is an option as well for you. And you can actually utilize this and actually go through various tutorials if you're up to something like this or you're very interested in something like this. Okay? So that's just a little bit look into QGIS. You can see from adding in shape files that you can download from Diva GIS, from different sites, from Sedima, and actually import those and it's very simple to do that, as you can see how I did that. Okay. So I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information. And so I'll keep this brief here covered. We can actually go back from the starting, talking about understanding the principles of GIS, how we go about looking at the natural environment. We can look at the information for what we placed on Google Earth Pro, then what we looked at for Google My Maps, and then what we did with Data Wrapper, right? You want to remember some of the websites that we covered in terms of finding information, Sedima, different census bureaus, and also Diva GIS and the different sites that we collected data from, and then also a bit on QGIS. Now, I don't want to take a lot more of your time in looking at this session, but I hope it was helpful. One thing that I want to caution you all when you are going about making your maps is to do some more research, look very well into the established guidelines for making maps and visualizing information, and be very careful about how you map your information, because you don't want to input biases into your maps and create disinformation with what you're mapping, and actually show some of the products that you might have to, bring out various pieces of information that you might be interested in. All right. So you guys do take care and enjoy. Happy mapping, everyone. Take care.